It's a growth story. The customer is in focus. It will always be a co-pilot. It will not be an autopilot. Just to remind you, Ukraine is closer to Austria than Dornbirn.
Good afternoon and welcome to Banking on Success, the podcast in which experts and business leaders share their compelling stories from CEE and beyond. My name is Elica Kavrakova, Group Head Institutional Clients of RBI, and I have with me today, first time as co-host,
Valerie Krömer-Kones. I'm heading the Client Lifecycle Management in RBI.
And Valerie and myself are very pleased to welcome Kurt Svoboda, CFO and CRO of UNIQA Insurance Group. Welcome and thank you for accommodating us in your schedule today.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and happy to be here.
And Kurt, before jumping into our conversation, I would like to shortly introduce you to our audience. First of all, I guess UNIQA is a well-known brand, but nevertheless, I need to mention number 2 in Austria and one of the top insurance companies in Central and Eastern Europe. Kurt, you studied business administration at Vienna University and international management in St. Gallen. And before joining UNIQA, you've been working for KPMG, Wiener Städtische and AXA. And this brings me already to my first question, where I would like to bring you rather early in your career days. What made you choose the world of finance, and particularly what attracted you to the insurance part of it?
Yeah, the world of finance was a little bit of I would say, not planned. It happened. I was studying, as I said, on the Vienna University and did a master exam, as it is today, on the topic of balance sheet and the annual accounts of insurance companies. And my professor in these days said, Mr. Svoboda, I do not want that you sum up 20 books to one. So I would like to have something a little bit from the business, from the market. And in these days, being a young student, I said, okay, but what to do and where to go to? And he said, I have a good contact to KPMG. In these days, I did not know what KPMG was. And this is how I came to the audit world, and this is how I joined KPMG. And honestly speaking, from I would say, writing a master degree, I was highly infected on the topic of how insurance auditing works. And this is how my life started in finance. In these days, I was a little bit of a first love, as you say, because I did this job in February, and I was then asked by KPMG if I would like to stay. And as you know, as a young student, money is key, and I, on myself,
not only, I would say, but particularly.
I was sharply thinking of staying. And my father in these days said, son, come on, don't be so stupid. You are 2 meters before the end. And if you start now at KPMG, maybe you missed then the final exam. And he was right. I said to KPMG, okay, thank you for the support on the master degree, and then finished the study in record time for me because I wanted to work. And this is how I then came to the finance world, a little bit by incident.
Sounds cool. And without AI at this point in time, right? You had to summarize everything.
Yeah, I remember the PTX and stuff like that.
Through your journey, did you come across mentors or specific projects or any defining moments in your leadership or also in risk management? Is there anything you can tell us about?
Yes, I was in the whole career always looking for people who I can talk to, where I can share opinions, a little bit of having also an outside-in view on my business, on my job, not on the career, because career is something that I would say still having made a career, but this is not plannable for me. A career is something that, once it happens, but it is something that is coming or not. But coming back to your question is, I started earlier to have people who I, on the one hand, admired. It was one partner at KPMG, Peter Honzak, but so far he died too early in this world. But he was a guy who was super smart. He was very calm, very bright on insurance knowledge, and working with him was for me always a little bit of learning day by day. This went on also in other companies. And during my first management job, I had get learned and I used to work with a ex-CEO in Germany. So I traveled four times a year to Germany, to Frankfurt and to Munich, and sat together a whole day with an ex-CEO and discussing with him topics that were for me in these days a little bit of out of reach. It started with how to lead a team, how to restructure a team, which the do's and don'ts of leadership. And I always then flew home with a bunch of paper, but this was for me always very, I would say, always very a learning tool, something that I would never have thought in this case. And if you ask me, generally, this is what I recommend to everybody. No matter if you are in a top position, if you are in a job position, wherever, look for somebody whom you trust, whom you can say everything, really everything, and which gives you his or her idea on your topics. Because this brings you in a completely new light. This brings you in a completely new way of thinking. And it is not somebody who is knowing you. Because if we talk each other, we know, and everybody has a little bit of a stake. But somebody who is completely neutral has no stake. He has only the job to help you or to give you some ideas. And this is what I do up to now.
A great opportunity,
and
right?
And I would like to build up on what you just said, and maybe add a bit of a kind of a personal touch. Allow me to reveal something which I guess many in the audience do not know. You're president of the oldest football club, First Vienna. So, is there something out of this role which shaped you, particularly in respect of how you deal with setbacks? And also connected to that, what else many do not know which made you who you are today?
So I start with the first one. The job at First Vienna FC is something that, of course, is for me something which is a little bit make the hobby to your dream. So that means I was always playing football. I was a half professional in my lifetime. And UNIQA is one of the biggest sports sponsor companies in Austria, and with football and with ski, we have good contacts to that. And First Vienna is also a club that we are supporting. I do this, by the way, because of, look where the money goes and do not have the problems with compliance and all that stuff. But also I do this because of passion. And I always say I do this of passion because you can learn so much between sports and management / life. It's about, as you said, it's about setbacks. It's about emotions. It's about, especially in a team sport like football, to create a team spirit. Because take football, and you have very much synonyms to the business, because you have alpha guys here or there. You have people whom you like and more, and you don't like more. You have people who are I would say, the superstars, and you have people who are maybe in the background, but also important. So the goalkeeper is maybe somebody who is in the background, but he's super important in the sports. The same is in the business. You have the guys who are, I would say, the front runners, the loud ones, the marketing guys, but you need also the ones who are quiet and doing the job and helping the whole team. And I always say it's important to create this team. Yeah, and I always say in a metaphor, 11 Messis or 11 Ronaldos is not a team. And the same you can apply for the management and for the leadership. 11 superstars on KI or on accounting, on you name it, on sales, does not make UNIQA
will not guarantee
the success. And the second thing is, for me personally, you have to deal with a lot of characters. And to deal with a lot of characters, the very simple ones up to the very special ones is always in the management the case. You have people who are very difficult, who are very who like to have more contact, to have more listening. The other ones want to speak, and this is what you can always learn. And this is why I always try to get my people to the sports and say, okay, learn out of it. And this is what I like on this job. The second question, what people maybe don't know from myself, I think there are a lot of things that people do not know from myself, because on the one hand, I try to be open and transparent. On the other hand, I try to be, I would say, always to have a barrier between the private things and the things everybody can know.
But I was saying, like, which helps make you
correct.
who you are today. Yeah.
There are two things that come to my mind. The first thing is, I was leading the COVID crisis team at UNIQA, and I was, in that case, the crisis manager of the whole group. That means around 20,000 people, around the responsibility of taking decisions very quick. And nobody, of course, there was a team, but the decision is in a crisis team to be taken. And I took a decision which was in these days for me super heavy. I told the whole customer team on the telephone, okay, that they have to go home, because we could not open up our call center for the time being, because COVID was getting more and more heavy. And that means around more than, I think, 600 people in Austria, but in Europe, to say, okay, you have to go home. And we have never tested it before, because call center was a job you do in the office. And we bought the headsets and we sent them home, and it worked. And for me, it was a situation where I said, who in this world would have taken such a decision if COVID would not be there? And this was for me a learning in terms of that sometimes you have to take decisions even when they're risky and even when they look to be not to be possible. And this not to be possible, especially in these days, is something that I would say we have to think. Maybe it seems to be not possible, but it is possible. And as a risk manager, I always say where risks are, there are chances. And this was a little bit of a super learning curve, and a situation where I, looking back, said this made also my CRO phase a little bit different than in the past.
And this is very interesting remark which you just made. Maybe partially untypical for a risk manager to say there were the risks, yes, but there are the chances as well. And that's a good switching gear to the markets, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, can you give us a quick snapshot on the industry dynamics currently, from emerging trends to regulatory requirements and customer needs or customer expectations? That would be super interesting.
Yeah, happy to do so. So first of all, the customer and even as a CFO and CRO, I start not with the regulatory. I do not start with geopolitics and economics. I start with the customer, because I think this is exactly the dynamic. The customer is in focus. So we are a customer-driven company. We in the insurance industry also is, if you ask me, in a super transformation phase to set the customer in a completely new light. One can say this is nothing new, because the customer always was in focus. That's correct. But now the customer drives us because of digital elements, about even now with artificial intelligence, informations that have been never so transparent as they are at the moment. And this has, for us as insurance industry, a completely new way of thinking on our products, a completely new way of acting with our clients. Because if somebody comes to you, it's a little bit like the medicine. People go first to Dr. Google and then to the real doctor. And the same is here. You know a little bit, you can look on that, and you have to react. So therefore, first thing is we are in a super transformation phase as insurance industry. Plus, we have to rethink on how we approach our customers. So that's one thing. The second thing is you have been mentioning emerging risks, and I think here we have a 5 topics that drives the industry at the moment. The first one is geopolitical development. Even if you say Iran and Israel is far away, but it has a huge impact on us.
And it's not that far away.
And it's not far away. Same is between Russia and Ukraine. Just to remind you, Ukraine is closer to Austria than Dornbirg.
Yeah,
so
no.
the thing is, we sometimes tend to say, okay, that's far away, but this is not far away. Second thing is that I see as emerging risk, of course, everything around climate. That has an impact in Austria on nut cuts. This has an impact on Austria, even if you ask me personally, as I'm a great skier and I like skiing, but if you look at the moment in Austria, even in the Alps, and compare this to previous times, I think there is a difference. I call it like
and
that.
We still remember the floodings, what was 2 years ago? Yeah.
Floodings, things like that. Third topic is about cyber. Fourth topic is about demographics. We are getting older. We are getting healthier older. But are we ready in that case for having the money in this age? Are we having the right topics in terms of medicine and caring in that respect? Yes, and these are the emerging risks, if you ask me, that drives at the moment the industry.
I'd like to touch base on what you said first with the geopolitics, but asking from a different perspective, the geopolitical fragmentation, how does it impact the role of insurance, like a regional insurance company versus the global players? And then I have another question, but let's first maybe touch base on that.
I always say the advantage of a regional insurance company like we are, so UNIQA is in Europe among the top 30, and in that case, we have a higher speed in adapting us. Okay, so that means when we have to react, I think we are faster than an Allianz or than Generali or AXA in this world, as the global players. The second thing is, I think we can use, even in geopolitical environments, better the community concept within our groups. That means that people work for each other, that people can move, that people can also work for the group. It's easier to organize. The disadvantage is, if you ask me, that our diversification effect is limited, because if we have a problem in Ukraine or in Poland, the diversification is Austria or another country in that respect. If Allianz has a problem in Eastern Europe, they have Africa, they have the US, they have whatever. So this is my view on geopolitical impacts. And the last topic is, of course, that the exposure for us as mid-sized European players always has to be quite good balanced to bonds, to investments, to certain assets, because an overweight here or there cannot be compensated in others. So that's the consequence.
Would you allow me one more question
Of course, go ahead.
And now coming to actually our home region, because you and us, we have same footprint. Actually, UNIQA with 14 markets, even this is without Albania and Kosovo, which... how do you see the region, and how is the growth story of the region changing in your view?
We started at UNIQA with the Eastern European markets really, I would say, in the beginning of the 2000s. We had made more than 20 acquisitions in 2000 up to 2010. We acquired more than 15 or 20 companies, life, non-life, IT companies, all that stuff. And when I look back and compare to now, is that the growth and the development of the economy always was 2.5 to 3 times faster than Western European. Western Europe defined, if you say so, Austria, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, all that stuff. And this was in a consequence done in the last 2 or 3 decades. And if you look back, 2025, it maybe sounds impressive, and it is impressive if you ask me. CE was the fastest growing market worldwide. Far ahead of Asia, far ahead of China. This was CE. And this is the huge potential I see personally there, and this is why we are in there, and this is why we stay there. There are several elements. The first one is economic-wise. If you look on Poland, what's going on there,
that's amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah. So the Polish industry, financial industry, heavy industry, even what they have around the harbors and the ships, that's amazing.
Some people even say this is the new Germany.
Yeah, no, it is. It can be. It can be. Yeah, correct. But also, if you look on how Czech Republic develops, yeah, so even this is also Hungary is coming back. Yeah, I don't talk about any political topics in case this is not my issue here, not my topic. But these are countries where I say, okay, they have huge potential for the future. And the second thing is, it's not only the growth which you can do by organic, that means getting new customers, it's also that people are spending more and more. And when people are spending more, they're also insuring more. Or like in the banking industry, they get more for loans or they get more for savings. And this is where we see the huge potential. It's a growth story.
Absolutely. I mean, when you before when we were talking about the industry snapshot and etc., you mentioned digitization. How did UNIQA respond to digitization and AI? What are the challenges and, as you also mentioned, the opportunities that have those things brought to the business? I mean, when I use my UNIQA portal, I upload things and it's so quick, and you upload a picture and how do you see this? I mean, it's great.
So I think that I said in the beginning, insurance industry is, if you ask me, super interesting, super fast, but on the other hand, super traditional. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling this to you because if you compare the digitization of an insurance company to a, car industry or to other industries, so we are far away. This has to do a little bit with starting, to whom does the customer belong? Does it belong to an agent, to a broker, to the sales person? And we say, no, he belongs to the company. But this is not so seen by the agents, by the brokers, and by the sales guys, because he says, okay, Hans or Franz belong to me. This is my client. Okay, and therefore, to getting the data that you need, that takes time. This is important because our digitalization process is there for a little bit longer and last longer than in other industries. As UNIQA, we see two stages in that case. The first one is the real digital elements, that the My UNIQA portal that you say, that you can upload, that you can see your policies, a little bit comparable to the online banking that is visible. The second thing is that this what is coming now, everything about artificial intelligence. So that means on the one hand, for the customer, maybe in 5 and in 3 years earlier, that he can, with artificial intelligence, have a customized policy for his need. Maybe for the customer that it's super easy to make claims management for him. For the customer, it's super easier to combine the things on a journey that he has. And for us, as the company, that it's getting efficiency gains. And the quicker we are in the service to our customers, the better it is. The longer it takes, I think this is a disadvantage that you have in these days. And I think it's also a rally who is first. It's a rally who is doing the things sustainable. And this is how I see digitization. On the other hand, I have also to admit that I was disappointed, and I'm still disappointed on the behavior, especially in Austria, on the population generally in respect of online elements for insurance. So if you imagine that only 2% of the Austrian market, it's no matter if UNIQA, it's VIG, it's Allianz, the others, 2% of the Austrian population is using online insurance for buying insurance. 98% are doing this personally. And this was also...
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Yes.
And this is, that's the very traditional way of buying insurance. Will this change quickly? Maybe AI helps us here, But it's not the case that I would say in 2 years, 75% of the Austrians are doing this only online. If you go 100 kilometers more eastwards.
I was about to ask about the comparison to CE, because I guess there is a different story.
If you look in Hungary, we have even no more sales guys there on the field.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
If you go, at least, it sounds not super stupid, if you go to Ukraine, we changed completely the insurance model there. It's online in that case. And it's about simple products, very standardized. And here the big difference comes. And this is how you have to distinguish between the different markets.
That's good.
That's really actually confirms what I perceive from the banking side in terms of innovation drive and using of online banking services in CE much more than in Austria. And partially this brings me to maybe the last question on the topic, because we spoke now about digitalization. Now, coming to a bit of a bird view perspective, what do you believe will be the big innovations which would come and shape or really kind of change the insurance sector in the next decade?
I'm 100% convinced that insurance will be integrated in other products. So if it is the travel journey to the US, if it is the buying a car, if it is whatever you have. So I think
the insurance as a service.
Yeah, insurance as a service embedded in different workflows. The second thing is that we have more and more needs that are then also covered by health. I call it the ecosystem health. It's not only more the health insurance. I'm convinced this will stay, but everything around. Look on, just to give you a number, in Austria or generally in Europe, we spend 96% on getting healthier and only 4% on staying healthy. I think this will change because people have seen that with healthy living, they have also benefit in the age.
It's the prevention.
Correct. Thank you for that. So this will change. And insurance, especially like UNIQA's, we are in the health segment. This is also a game changer, I personally see in that respect. And the third element will be everything about artificial intelligence. So it is a topic of being quicker. It's a topic of being more efficient, standardized processes, more fraud prevention. This I see as a huge game changer also in the future. These three elements are the ones.
Question of curiosity, because before I again give the floor to you, because now I'm curious in respect of the future and the employment of artificial intelligence. What will an insurance company still need the human capital for?
And maybe what
if
processes
the people,
will be eliminated.
If a person can apply online and actually do it himself.
Here the point comes, how is your view on artificial intelligence? And I'm convinced that for the time being, it will always be a co-pilot. It will not be an autopilot. So
nicely formulated. Yeah.
The idea that a insurance company exists with no people or just the ones who make the agents, this is for the time being for me not ready. Okay. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you need people who make a little bit the check, who understand the things. You need people. You will need people also on the sales side. Not everybody will take it online. So you will need people who check all the compliance rules. Of course, it's more efficient. The way of working will be differently. The need of the education will be differently. You will need people especially in the technology part. Okay. You will need people even in the finance and risk area. But overall, there's an umbrella. The jobs and the job descriptions will be differently than today.
Yeah.
The classical bookkeeper, the classical guy who makes, compliance checks, this will change. Yeah. Do I see a big revolution for us in the society? Maybe I'm here too simple thinking. I would say no, because this is the same. Like if you look back, when I was young, there was this videothèques where you went to, yeah? And now nobody goes to a videothèque. Everybody goes to Netflix or to whatever. The point is you have to adapt yourself early enough, because otherwise you will stay. Yeah? If you want to make it more dramatically, when the car was invented, everybody in these days says the car will never be a thing. We run the horses. Yeah? And this is what at the time I see. Yes, the speed is different. That's the big topic for us. We have to adapt much more quicker.
Yeah, cannot agree more.
Also, when it comes to electric cars, everybody thought, oh God, nobody will use it. But now it's really, it's part of the picture in every town.
Which brings us to the next topic.
UNIQA is very vocal about its commitment to sustainability. Can you maybe share a little bit of your journey, how you got there, and how it impacts the day-to-day business in your industry?
Yep. Sustainability, look, is a topic that is, on the one hand, super important for us for the future. When you talk about a how to call it, a good future or a sustainable future, you have also to think on those topics like ESG. On the other hand, I have to say that how the industry or the regulator started to work with this topic was completely wrong, because the first thing that the industry did was to create a report and not to think of what can we do for ESG topics. And that's the reason why in the beginning, and still, this topic is treated on the one hand, if you make it fails, very regulative. You do just because you have to make a report. And this is wrong. We tried to, on the one hand, we have to make this report. Okay,
ratings.
And ratings, correct, because this is something that you are forced to. But this is more in the background, to say so. More important is for us that we are creating values with this for our products and for our customers. And this is what we do with a company at UNIQA, which is called UNIQA Sustainable Solutions. A company which helps corporates to work with their risk systems, to assist them in ESG topics, to go through, that you can imagine, to go through to the company and look, okay, is everything okay for your fire management? Is everything okay for your security management? What do you need for your personal ESG topics in that case? With this, we help on the one hand them to limit their risks. With this, we help those people to also fulfill their ESG needs. And thirdly, with this, we help them to reduce also their premiums or their claims prediction for the future. And this is exactly what I say, which makes sense, because people understand what sustainability, what ESG means. Just to collect the numbers of, I would say, I don't know how much paper you use and how much light you spend, and if you have energy from gas or from photovoltaics, is nice, but something that the people cannot grab.
I mean, there's always a balance between purpose and profitability in those sustainability topics. How do you approach this balance? Do you still have to earn? Yeah. But we have to meet the ratings, we have to meet the reportings just for reporting purposes, or where's the balance between the real purpose and the profitability?
The balance is between that, you can say, you have to spend in sustainability. Like if you want to say you want to have photovoltaics, which we have in the Austrian offices, in that case, you have to spend first and then you can earn. The same is for the cars, if you say so. On the other hand, for insurance companies, the big topic is asset management. Yeah? Because here you have a huge impact. If you invest in more sustainable assets, that means no correlation to coal, to oil, whatever. here can also say, okay, we are avoiding giving money to companies who are doing this, which are then not polluting anymore the air. And here, I would say the difference between the yields that you get for sustainable investments and non-sustainable investments, this is for me neglectable. Yeah, so we have more than at least around 2 billion at the moment in infrastructure invested for wind parks and stuff like that. It's a long duration business. Long duration means in that case you get an illiquidity premium. Of course, it's not that flexible in selling and in buying, but the big difference is not visible for me at the moment. And this is where we say, okay, this is our focus. On the one hand, what can we do for the clients and to bring them to awareness, to do something on ESG, environmental, social, and governmental. And on the other hand, to say, okay, our asset management here to investment in not everything, but here to also fix the ratings and give also to the market a clear sign. That's how we balance this.
That sounds great. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe one question to a CRO, as you probably know all the risk scenarios and you draw them and back and forth. What is the risk that you worry most about in the next years or in the next decade? Maybe personally and also business-wise.
Personally, I would say I often think of how the society in this world, which is now geopolitically very, very volatile, can stay that stable. Yeah, so this is for me a situation where you have to live with fake news, you live with a lot of bad news.
It's very polarizing.
You live with polarizing things. You have the discussion in terms of we are we and we don't need unions, whatever, in that case. And the question is, how can we keep the population stable so that no riots or whatever, especially in Europe, can be created? I think this is something that is giving me thoughts on thoughts day by day, or not day by day, but this I would answer in that respect, because here the only thing you can do is you can try to convince. The only thing is you can talk to people, but you cannot solve it in that case, neither as CRO nor as a company like UNIQA. And that's one of the biggest risks I see in these days, from a personal standpoint. It's very personal. It has nothing to do with UNIQA. If you look on the company side, I think there is a risk that is, I would call it the transformation risk. The transformation risk in terms of, on the one hand, not to be too slow and to protect the situation because you believe AI is just a mainstream. It is a bubble that goes away, like ventures, maybe a little bit like ESG, things like that. And on the other hand, to be too fast and to set everything on that and to lose your employees. Yeah, because people they need time. And using AI is not only asking chatbot or Gemini when the next flight to London goes or whatever, give me a summary of a paper. This is more. This is talking about jobs. This is talking about processes. And this means that people are then protecting. Yeah? And this is what I mean with the transformation.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good thought.
I'm still kind of, while you speak, I was thinking about what you said on your personal risk perspective. In fact, it makes me think we in Europe are kind of a bit spoiled and are not able necessarily, because we have comfortable life, to also recognize this risk. And I think in other regions it's a different perspective. But within such an environment in which we live in, what would be, and this would be kind of the last question of today, what would be your advice to the young people, and particularly those who also would like to join the insurance sector and the finance sector in general under these circumstances?
I think it is always good that the young people, on the one hand, don't rely on everything what the media says and what you read and what you hear on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So that's one thing. Use the community and use also your environment in those cases. This is just one part and one side of the coin, I always say. The second thing is that I tell my kids, I have 2 kids, I'm telling them, also think if this is possible, or if it's just a picture that is created here or there. And the third thing is that they should also speak up and say also their opinion, no matter if it's in small groups or in a company, because to rely on that everything stays like it is not a solution for the future. So this is, and it's their life, it's their situation that they have, and these are some recommendations I can give to the young kids.
I think they lose a little bit of their individuality. I mean, I'm a mother of 3, and I see the differences between boys and girls, and this ideal of fit into the world.
The speak up is so important. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Resonates a lot. So speak up for yourself, for your individuality and your opinion. It's a great thought.
And also the topic of it's certainly not comparable to my career, because I want to say if you have the feeling that you don't fit in a company or in a community, then go. Take the next one. Because of course, if you look at my career, I just made 2 times a change in the career. At these days, this is much more easier in that case, and people have also more possibilities. And if the culture doesn't fit, if you have the feeling that the environment that you're working in doesn't fit, or even that you're private individuals, then change it. You have to take the decision. This is also something very important.
You can only change it when you change it. That's true.
It's in our hands. Thank you for this great conversation, for the personal insights. Actually, you made with us a great journey in a short period of time through leadership and the industry. Thanks again in our both name.
Thanks a lot.
And dear audience, thanks for tuning in today, and stay with us for the next episode of Banking Con Success.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Raiffeisen Bank International. Make it happen.